All right, there we go. We are good. I'm gonna get my setup. Whoop. Setup all right. Okay. So, hello, Hugo.
Hello, Dylan.
I actually don't think I said hello before we started. So, hello, Hugo. What kind of tea are you drinking?
Just the regular tea, you know.
Just what? Well, a regular tea.
Well, it's if you went to any place in the, it's just the normal tea you get.
It's
Technically, its
just
name's Orange Pico, but no one really calls
it's
it
just
that.
orange pico. Okay.
That's like the one
Um,
basic stuff.
Actually, I got. You made me remember this. I was at Marché Jean Talon,
Uh,
and I got maple tea. Yeah, I'm very interested to see how that tastes.
I have a small tea issue because I do like the Secret Santa thing, and I'm a big believer in the whole idea of the point of gifts is someone's supposed to try to figure out what you would want.
Yeah.
So I normally just put like surprise me or like some rough suggestions.
Yeah.
And the first year, I got a metric crap ton of chamomile and a bunch of other tea. I'm
Okay.
like, okay. So I finally drank a bunch of it. Keep in mind, I still had like half of the chamomile along with other stuff from the previous Secret Santa. And then I get the exact same type of tea like, to letter. So now I have
Yeah.
more. Sorry, like I remember I took a friend of mine to the side and I'm like, yeah, I'm super thankful for the gift. Don't take it wrong, but just casually, and I mean this doing this casual way. You can just not get me any more tea. Like there's only so much I can drink, right? Because a lot of it's
uh,
right,
yeah.
which I don't drink most days, and most days it's just I wake up, throw something in, done. I don't want to do all the
Hmm.
complicated stuff. So yeah, it's a weird complaint, but that's my life.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. There is such thing as too much tea or too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we you were just saying that we have our so today's episode, we're going to be doing our top five favorite military units, historical military units, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to be doing it in any in any real particular order, because it's hard to find a favorite.
Yeah,
I find.
it's also kind of hard because like some of these units, at least mine, are going to be from like ancient antiquity, and you can't really compare, some guy from 2000 BC to a Prussian, infantry regiment. It's not exactly fair.
Yeah, yeah, it's a hard it's a yeah, it's not a fair comparison. I think I have two units that are kind of general, I
Mhm.
think. Or well, not really. I have one unit that's pretty general. But seeing as though you are the guest, I'm going to let you start off with number five.
Okay, this is in no particular order, so my number does not necessarily reflect where they are in my grand opinion. They're just random. So I've been really into Alexander the Great recently, and I just love the companion cavalry. Like they're their own
Oh,
thing. They kind of ran around doing their own thing. They often, uh, and the impressive thing is they often kind of, despite having every reason to break and run, they really didn't. And like you have like, what was it like Orestios the Black, and they all like cool ass
yeah.
names.
Oh,
And
there's
it's
so
almost
many
like
just
it's
great
something of like
characters
a
from them.
fantasy book, right? It's like
Yeah.
500 of your best mates, and they all have legends in their own right. It's a bit like the Argonauts, right? Right, all
Yeah.
their heroes in their own right working together, and that's kind of the feel I get from it. So it's something out of fantasy, but they were effective unit. They did a lot of really impressive stuff with Alexander, and I think a really solid base to start off of.
Yeah, that's definitely. I thought about putting companion cavalry on there. I thought about them and cataphracts, putting them and cataphracts on there,
Mhm.
but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Even though the companion cavalry, they really just sound like it's like 2,000 absolute boys just charging into battle.
But I just like the fact it is something straight out of a Greek myth. It's like all these heroes, and
Yeah,
something you would read in a book, and
yeah, it's
I just find it cool. But
yeah,
something that stands out to me, and I could be wrong on this, but at least during that time, sure you had like these type of slingers or these like archers from a particular thing. The reason they stand out is that they're giving their own name and they're kind of giving their own class. Where normally it's just like, well, these are just Macedonian pikemen, and these are phalangites. So they're kind of uh, they're a bit like the famous regiments you later hear about. They were
Yeah.
distinct in their own right. They weren't just Alexander's cavalry.
Yeah. No, they are. They're just cool. I don't know. There's not much else to say. Everything about them's cool.
I just wish we had like more stories about what some of them did, like afterwards or
I
that.
mean, there's a story about what was the guy Cletus? Is it Cletus the Black?
Yeah, Cletus the Back. It was he saved
He
Alexander.
saves Alexander by chopping a
This is a
guy's
crazy
arm
story where
off.
Alexander was wounded in the head
Yeah.
by a spear, still managed to whip out his sword and kill a guy, and then right before someone killed him, Cletus the Back saved him by cutting that guy's hand off.
Yeah,
And if I
it's
recall the story, years later, Alexander, in a rage, killed Cletus over something, and then I might be misquoted. I just remember Cletus got killed as a result of Alexander, and then Alexander got really, really sad about it because he was like,
is
"Ah, shit."
is it Cletus that he kills? I
I,
thought it was someone else.
I thought it was Cletus the Black. I
It
could
might
be.
be Cletus the Black.
I want
Now
to
that
know
you
about that name though.
now that you're saying it, I think it is because his boyfriend dies, but he doesn't kill his boyfriend. I think it might actually. I think you're right. It might be Cletus the
No,
Black.
I think the story is Cletus tried to do something, and then in a rage, I can't remember if he directly
It's
did it, but Cletus died, and then he's like, he got really sad.
I know. Well, one of the stories is they're drinking together, and Cletus kind of slides on an insult to Alexander. Like they're all drunk, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh yeah,
and Cletus insults, or someone, I can't remember if it's Cletus, someone insults Alexander, and it's one of Alexander's best friends, and he just takes a spear and stabs him.
'cause I
And
believe
then,
what he did is he basically said that Alexander was acting more like a Persian than a Macedonian.
yeah, yeah, because he was getting people to like prostrate and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, and he just stabs this guy. And then afterwards, he continue. I can't remember if it's he continues to drink, and then the next morning he's like, "What have I done?" But I think it's immediately after he stabs the guy, and then the guy dies, and he's like,
Yeah.
"What have I done? I just killed one of my
But
mates."
like, yet again, this sounds exactly like something from the Odyssey or the Iliad. It sounds like a fairy
Yeah,
tale book. It's too. That
it's
said,
it's very heroic and very tragic.
yeah, it is something sure. The Odyssey. It's if I had the power to travel back in time just to watch things in time, one of the things I would have to do if I had to watch anything that Alexander did, I would skip all the battles as much as I'd love to see them. But I believe it's the Ostios mutiny.
Yes,
He
that's like that's he's got an amazing speech.
because we know bits of the speech because of like historians, but no one knows exactly. And considering that it legitimately turned an entire army that was about to abandon him to basically groveling for forgiveness, it is
Yeah.
probably one of the greatest speeches ever given.
Yeah, I want that would be great. I would actually I would even skip that, and I would take a full like hour and a half movie of Alexander the Great and his boys partying it up in Babylon.
Oh, that would be insane.
I
But,
would watch the shit out of that movie.
there's just a lot of stories like that where I know. I think that's the most mystical thing about Alexander because the Romans and the Greeks are like, oh, he conquered everything. For me, it's like some of his tales straight up read like the Iliad. It's
Yeah.
this can't have happened, but it did.
Well, some of it must have been Alexander kind of blowing it out of proportion, but he also I have a feeling that he kind of lived like he was specifically trying to do that kind of thing,
Oh yeah,
you
because like
know?
what the was it like the Macedonian knot or something,
Yeah, the
right?
Gordian knot.
Yeah, where
Yeah,
he's just
there's
like
no way
cutting
that
his
happened.
sword.
There's no way that story happened. He just takes an iron sword and cuts a big, massive knot in two.
Yeah,
You know, like even the best swords that are made today, it's not going to go through a 2 foot thick knot,
yeah.
right?
'Cause it's one of those things
But
that we know it's overemphasized, but it's one of these things that there's
it's
probably
such great propaganda.
well,
It's
it's even that, but
so great.
it's one of these classic things. It's like even if you read the story of like Caesar, where like he overemphasizes the numbers and the casualties, but there's always a bit of truth in it somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things. I feel like Alexander didn't live long enough to kind of propaganda a lot of it. So I think a lot of this propaganda was probably done by his successor kingdoms, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And he has a biographer with him, but he's
Yeah,
probably telling the biographer, like, oh, yeah, all the things that are great that I actually do, you put those down. But, throw in a couple extra.
yeah. But it's just like the famous speech. Like we know bits and pieces of what he said, but it's one of those things that Alexander's life was such a like a constant, massive of marching around, partying, and doing dumb shit that it's like
Yeah.
I don't know how they had time to write most of it down.
Uh, yeah, that's true.
So,
Okay, at the risk of this becoming
yeah, sorry.
a whole thing on Alexander, because we could definitely do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with my fifth one. Again, yeah, this is not really in any particular order. And this is a very general, just kind of unit that you see all throughout history that's just always badass. And that is horse archers. They're just, they're so cool. Horse archers, no matter where you are, if it's, the Scythians, the Mongols, the Sioux in North America, it's
Mm.
just, they have such a broad range and they just have such range. They can fight just so many different kinds of foes and come out victorious.
Because they were the ultimate warriors being, and a lot of people don't know this because they're drawn up it, but originally samurai were horse archers,
Yeah,
which is the reason why bow and arrow things are so traditionalized over there.
yeah. And what's cool about samurai is that they essentially have massive longbows. Like most horse archers have a bow, and it's relatively small. You can't see my other hand, but it's usually a horse bow is between 3 and 4 feet long,
Mm-hmm.
right? When it's all strung up. But
Yeah,
samurai bows are these massive 6 foot things, like English longbows,
yeah,
but they are recurved like other longbows.
yeah,
And what's so cool about those is that it's you actually shoot, you hold the bow, I think 2/3 of the way down
yeah.
instead of in the middle. And I don't know why that was. I don't know too much about Japanese archery, but it's a really cool style,
I know
and
it's
it's fitting for
incredibly
the samurai.
complicated, and it's like many things in Japan right now. It's an art form, and it's you have to approach it, shoot it, and bow a certain way. I think it's
Yeah,
just to go like the process of going up to shoot the bow. There was like 23 to 26 steps you have to do.
yeah, there's lots of things in Japanese martial arts, like the really traditional ones, are super
Yeah.
regimented, I guess.
I think it's the fact that it was been along that they've Shintoism believes a spirit and character to everything. So I think it's
Yeah,
everything. Even if you look at it, if you look at how a sushi chef cuts up and prepares the fish, there's art to it. So it's everything they do. There's a certain art and style to it, and that's just a cultural thing.
yeah.
But yeah, I
I
think
mean, hey,
it's
it's
interesting.
definitely working for the Japanese.
Just
That's
before we get dragged to, I think it's definitely interesting, at least on the note of the samurai, that they transitioned from horse archers to more infantry roles. I can't recall many people that did that in my mental history where they went from one end of the spectrum to another. But to each
I
their own.
mean, the European knight half goes from like a dedicated cavalry to half they can fight as infantry if they want to. Um, in certain places, but yeah, Japan's like one of the only people that go from dedicated horse archer to dedicated infantry.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, well.
But yeah, horse archers, they're great. There's so many. The other thing that I really like about horse archers is, especially in the early modern era,
Mm-hmm.
they still go like, you can only really neutralize horse archers in like if you're fighting on their terrain once you do what the U.S. did. And what the U.S. did is they adopted the revolver, and revolvers were actually super super important in terms of fighting horse archers, because
Mm-hmm.
like a muzzle loading pistol, you get one shot and then you gotta reload it, right? Whereas a horse archer can just bang 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 shoot. But
Yeah.
with a pistol, with a revolver pistol, you can get those continuous shots in relatively quick succession. Especially if you're holding, two revolvers, you either have 10 or 12 shots, which is
Yeah.
roughly the same amount of arrows that, say, a Sioux or a Comanche would have had in his quiver.
It's also the fact that it's if a revolver hit, you can get hit by an arrow and survive and keep working, but at the range that a revolver is effective, if it hits you, especially with the US we're using,
Yeah,
it's likely to blow off your arm or put a very big hole in you. If you get hit by that, you're not. I doubt you'd be able to fight effectively,
yeah. A
especially those
well
in
a well
Philippines.
placed arrow deadly, but a badly placed bullet is a pain in the ass, you know.
It's also
Well,
the
I mean,
like, one shot from a revolver is probably also going to take out the horse, but
yeah, yeah. So yeah, horse archers, they're cool. And I really wish I could learn how to do horse archery because I got archery down somewhat.
Well, eventually
Uh,
Lars Anderson will bring back Mongolian horse archery or something crazy.
Lars Anderson really bugs me because everything he does is very, I don't want to say pseudo historical, but the process in which he kind of decided that's how people held their arrows is flawed.
I think his basis of they didn't carry around massive quivers on their back is fair enough to say, but I think he's trying to take his own approach to it. But I found
He's
it weird.
definitely, I mean, he's definitely cool. I think what he does is super, super cool, but it's not, um, it's not complete. It's some of it is historically accurate, like the way he shoots. There's definitely, Turkic and Mongolian people who do trick shots like that,
Yeah,
and who would have done trick shots like that. But the way, like the historical element of it isn't 100% correct, which
yeah.
I'm not going to fault the guy for that.
But I don't. In his defense, he's never sat down and claimed it 100%.
No, he hasn't.
I do find it cool that he trained Taron Egerton for like the Robin Hood movie, and apparently Taron Egerton
Yeah,
is really good.
really.
Yeah, like I think Lars Anderson himself said he's like, yeah, he's probably one of the best people I ever taught.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
look into
cool.
it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up.
I think to proceed, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I'm a really big fan of Rome, so I like the whole maniple system. I like the Legion, but in
Yeah.
particular, you gotta go with the 10th Legion, like Caesar's like favorite Legion. Like those guys, like they just went on to achieve just about everything. Like because even their descendants, right? They had a solid battle record, like
Mm-hmm.
absolutely beastly. So I'm just gonna choose them because we could talk about the legions until we're black and blue and how effective they were until other stuff went down. But I think the 10th Legion will just always, as far as I'm concerned, like be the best Roman Legion to ever exist. In my
Yeah.
humble.
Probably. I wrote the late Roman legionnaire for one of mine, but specifically from the period where the Roman army from not the late Republic, the late Empire, right, the dominate.
Yeah.
And I don't think they get enough credit.
Well,
Everyone puts a lot of attention on that classical Roman legionnaire, but as soon as the empire starts to fall apart, as soon as they split east and west, the Roman legionnaire kind of gets I don't know, I feel like they kind of get shafted in terms of history, and they were very good units in their time.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out that Rome could have been saved on multiple occasions, and it was normally always because it was like a competent legate with good legions at his hand, and politics or something did it. So I think it's not fair to just count it, and like they went far. Like you find legionary equipment in Ireland every once in a while. We don't know how it ended up there because we don't know the Romans went to Ireland, but we find it there.
Yeah, I mean, well, my point for that is, I definitely think that a lot of historians credit, like partially credit the decline of the Roman Empire to the decline of the Roman army, and they didn't have as good. They'll say, oh well, their armor wasn't as good, their training wasn't as good, and maybe they weren't on like, I don't know. I don't want to even say they weren't on the same. Yeah, maybe a lot of them weren't on the same level as, say, the earlier Legionnaire. I still think that, in terms of full armament, in terms of morale and training, they were still top notch during their day.
I was going to say, they got some of their better equipment after Caesar. That's when they start bringing out the Lorica Sigmentata. That's when they start developing their iconic helmets.
Yeah.
The best reason to explain why Rome fell was, you could literally just look to Machiavelli, and he put in good words of the fact that once Rome beat Carthage, and Caesar did his thing, there wasn't really a significant threat because Rome sustained on the fact that there was always that big threat they had to worry about.
Yeah.
It became so dominant, it became the whole idea of being a soldier became less important because, originally to be a consul, you had to have held a command. To be a praetor, you had to have fought. So everyone who was in office,
Yeah, that's true.
As time went on, that got laxer and laxer. And as the military lost respect, as over time, they just started paying mercenaries to do everything. And at that point, things go down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't 100% agree with that because I think that it's too long of a period between, say, the crisis of the 3rd century and Carthage.
Yeah.
And the whole mercenary thing is kind of, I don't know, unfair. It's like they had a migration crisis. Yeah. Europe had their migration crisis back in 2014.
Other things. I'm just saying. I think that was kind of the start. And the fall of Rome was a slow decline.
Oh yeah,
I think right about then, when Rome was dominant and they were in that position, that's when that slow decline starts. And they did have up periods again every once in a while. They did, but I think.
Well, it's always crazy for me is that after the crisis, they bounced back from the crisis of the 3rd century.
They did.
It's like watching a sports game, It's
like
they're down and then they just come back. It's like it's kind of like, it's like a hockey game. You're losing at the end of the 2nd period. You come back in the beginning of the 3rd period. You start winning, and then the team crumples once again at the end.
It's a bit like if you watch UFC, there was a Ferguson fight.
Yeah.
Like he just took so much beating, and you're like, how are you still alive?
Yeah, it's like that.
Like, let alone trying to fight back.
Yeah, it's, again, at the risk of not shutting up about Roman history, I'll let you go on with your, I guess, 3rd.
Oh, my 3rd, okay.
Yes.
Yet again, this might be a bit cheesy, but as I said, I'm really into the whole not late thing, but the early. So when Prussia was rising, so the troops under Frederick the Great.
Yep.
And I think it was the Paraleum Guard, which is like these Prussian infantrymen, all were 6 foot, all incredibly competent riflemen. But I think one of my favorite units, of this whole time period to emerge is like the Jaegers.
Yes.
Because they were said like, okay, let's wear darker colors. We're going to skirmish, but if needs be, we can fight in a line. They started using, more accurate muskets and eventually rifles. And they kind of start the basis of what eventually kind of becomes more modern infantry combat.
Yeah. Yeah, the Jaegers and I'd actually say the Jaegers and certain units in North America really start that modern combat.
Yeah.
That's just because I like North America. But yeah, no, the Jaegers. I was thinking about putting down the French Imperial Guard because it's not the same thing as the Jaegers, but they kind of have that mythos around them,
No, because I couldn't. If you told me to name like some key battles of Jaegers, I really couldn't. I just think they were cool. They kind of had a cool idea behind going, and they managed to survive in a time where, if you look at, most people really didn't like the concept of riflemen, right?
Yeah.
It's the 60th Rifles, under Wellington, and how Wellington's like anyone like trying to let them live, where everyone else in the English army is like, nope, get rid of them.
Yeah, and rifles do become an extremely part of the military in the 19th century and the 20th century, of course.
It really started to come to prominence, during the Napoleonic Wars, because you had the green jacket, which meant you were a rifleman.
But, and I mean, just the green jacket in and of itself shows kind of the ethos of riflemen. It's green. You aren't having this. You don't have royal blue or deep red. It's okay. We're gonna kind of hide.
We're gonna go stand in the forest and shoot at you instead of standing in that field.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. You get a similar thing in North America. right? You get a similar thing, especially with the Americans and with certain French colonial units in North America, and it's definitely a good tactic to employ. But like you said, it's kind of seen like archers were seen during ancient Greece. It's not as heroic.
It's that, but it's also the fact that I'm sure it exists, but like you don't have like the famous example where like a bunch of Jaegers single-handedly won the battle. You can't, there isn't like you can't compare them to like Leonidas at Thermopylae. They don't have.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, I don't have a single great story that I could really associate with them. But I just like Jaegers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could find some.
I'm sure it's out there.
Actually, I might do some digging into that, because you could get some pretty cool first-hand account things. From like one of my favorite books is Montcalm and Wolfe, and most of the battles in there aren't traditional battles. It's like it's Rangers fighting Rangers, or line infantry fighting as Rangers fighting Rangers, right?
Yeah.
And just those kinds of battles in North America are so cool. And the Jaegers kind of fulfill a similar role in Europe. Or the Jaegers, not the Rangers. I don't know if I said whatever. Yeah, definitely they're pretty cool.
I think it's your turn to give two now.
Yes, so I'm just looking at my thing, and I should switch that because I had the late Roman Legion, whatever. The Landsknecht.
Ooh.
I love the Landsknecht. I think that they are I think they're totally badass. For the people who don't know the Landsknecht, they are these big burly German guys who wore frills and big puffy outfits that were bright colors like yellow and green and red. And they were mostly pikemen and halberdier, but they also carried Zweihanders, which are massive two-handed swords that are tall, sometimes taller than they were. And these were tall guys, like 6 foot.
Because I know there's a variant of the Zweihander, and I can't quite remember its name, but it was because of all the curves in the blade. I can't remember its exact word, but it basically
it's
sword, which was
it's damn it. I want, it's not a Federschwert because that's a practice sword.
It's a variant of his Zweihander, it just had like a bunch of curves in it, which was meant to look like flames. Apparently.
Yeah, it might be like a Flammenswert or something like that. Yeah, but it's a really cool. It's got like these. So there's two. Yeah, there's like basically two different kinds, and both are really cool. One is much more wavy, and the other kind of looks like it's kind of like bumps on either side. And I think the idea is that it cuts better. Although I'm not sure. I've never tried. I'd love to try.
I know it's a style of Zweihander. It had a specific name.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I cannot remember either. But yeah, they're just these massive German guys that, and they're the kind of they're kind of the opposite of what you were saying about the Jaegers. Like these are the guys who will go in and they win the day. They're kind of shock troops almost. And one of my favorite little things about the Landsknecht is they were mercenaries, right? So you paid them to fight, but there was a specific kind of mercenary called a doubleman, and these were almost always just the big German guys with the Zweihanders, and they were called doublemen because they received double pay, and the reason they received double pay was because they probably weren't going to survive. Like their job was to be essentially like not a suicide bomber, but they went on suicide missions. It was like it's going to be you three guys on a bridge versus half their army. Go. If you make it out alive, we'll give you double the pay.
Pretty much. That's a bit similar to the very different role, but it's just a bit. I think they're called petardiers. The people that used to place petards on like fortress doors and shit.
Yeah, it's similar. But
Yeah.
yeah, are you looking up the? Are you looking
I
up
was
the word?
trying to, and then I couldn't find it, so
I could see. I could see her face brighten for a little bit, and then it
yeah,
goes back down.
yeah. I tried. I've given up. I'm sure I'll probably remember it the moment we finish this.
That's usually how it is.
You know,
I'll be
such
cooking supper tonight, and I'll be like, "Oh, it's this."
ah, damn it.
Yeah. All right. On to number two. Not necessarily the second most favorite. The second favorite. Most favorite is redundant. But yeah, it's go ahead.
Okay, I'm going through these. So yet again, I know some people will sigh, but I just love the entire concept behind these guys. But the Polish winged hussars or Poland Lithuanian winged hussars, it's I love the fact that we don't know why they had wings, and people are like, oh, it's because it made noises, and maybe it did if there was enough of them. But they used spears that were I think 2 to 3 times the length of most cavalry spears at the time. So you're sitting there, you've just fired at monumental amounts, you can't see anything but smoke, and all of a sudden you see these massive long poles and just wings coming for the thing. I know that's probably a bit esoteric and dramatized, but that's how I imagine it in my head.
No, that's pretty much how it was a lot of the time.
It, they were incredibly competent, really good head with cavalry, and it's the fact that, as far as I'm aware, they participated in the largest cavalry charge in human history, which was
Yes.
the relief of the siege of Vienna, and I think it was 22,000 cavalrymen all charged down the hill at once.
I think it's 22,000 cavalrymen and specifically 18,000 hussars.
Yeah,
So
because I
it's
know
18,000 hussars like flanked with
no other
4,000 other
no, the Winter
guys.
Stars were led by the king.
Yeah.
And that's another moment in history, just be there, because could you imagine the rumble of that many horses at once?
Dude, and they literally come down a mountain.
Oh yeah, coming down
It's
the mountain,
so cool.
largest cavalry charge, and you just have a bunch of janissaries who are probably in their trench trying to siege around and going like, why is the ground vibrating? And they look behind and
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, we're fucked.
Yeah, well, so what's so cool about that story is the king is King Jan the Third.
Yeah.
He's he's supposed to be this really fat guy. He's kind of old at the time. He's in his late 50s. He can barely get on his horse. And he actually, so they're part of the Polish Lithuanians are part of a relief force that comes to save Vienna. And the Germans, who are part of that relief force, start fighting the Ottomans who are besieging Vienna earlier in the morning.
Yeah, because
But
the ground was rugged and trained, so it was like, well, cavalry is
yeah,
useless. So what happened
yeah,
is the Germans and the other Allied forces spent the all day trying to take back these towns.
yeah.
So
They took
finally,
about
because
there
the
was a bunch of
Hussars
batteries in
came
smaller
down the mountain
towns.
is because everything else around them was muddy or just unfit. So it's for us to be able to effectively fight, we have to come down this mountain.
Yeah,
And
yeah. It's so cool.
I
I
just love
think they only do it around like 11 in the morning.
oh yeah, because they had to
Because
wait.
the king, well, no, the king was like, nope, we're having a mass. Like these guys need some God. We need some Jesus. We are having a mass, and then we'll kick the Ottomans'
I just love
ass.
the fact that the Ottoman commander legitimately saw this coming, grabbed the banner of the prophet, as much money as he could have, and was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving before he
Yeah,
gets banned."
yeah. It's
I remember the stories
Kara
after the battle.
Mustafa.
I think they spent like a week looting the Ottoman camp because there was just so much loot there that was
Well,
left.
the guys. So the guy is Pasha Kara Mustafa, and
Mm-hmm.
he comes and he is like, his whole kind of idea was, okay, I'm gonna take Vienna, and then we're gonna take all this area around here, and his long game was to kind of break away from the Ottoman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
right? So his long game is, okay, I'm gonna set up my own kingdom centered out of Vienna, and then once I amass enough power, I'll be able to break away from the Ottoman Empire and create my own empire.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Well, because also what happened is during the battle is he wanted arguably his best troops, the Janissaries, because he didn't want to pull them back from the siege. So he left his best troops to basically fight the siege.
Yeah.
Like, well, they're already in there, and the amount of time it take to pull out would probably cause more damage. So he went to fight, the relief force with less than his best.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of, it kind of sucks for him that the Janissaries couldn't do it, because he is fighting the Viennans who had been under siege for like 2 months
Well,
or
yeah, 'cause
something
I
like that.
read the story about how they planted 2 bombs under the wall, and then the Viennans legitimately found them and defused them with like seconds.
Yeah, yeah, that's a cool story. That's a the siege of Vienna. It's that's a really cool anecdote from history.
Yeah, it's one of those never moments. I just would have loved to be there because I think the siege of Vienna was arguably one of the worst, greatest routes in human history because a bunch of the Janissaries didn't even know the battle had ended, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of angry Germans behind them, which historically has told me there's not.
It's not where you want to be. I mean, it's literally. I've always thought of it as the siege of Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings. Like that's what it is. It's you have the Rohirrim come down only. So imagine this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The in Lord of the Rings, you know that scene, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, right?
Yeah, with all the elephants and shit.
Yeah, with all so the cavalry charge, that's the Rohirrim. You know
Yeah,
how many people that is supposed to represent?
I would have at one point in time, but I can't remember for the life of me.
Well, I am the superior nerd today, because that is supposed to represent, I think, between 6 and 10,000 cavalry.
Yeah, that's not right.
So double that. Just
Beautiful.
think of that in your mind. Double the charge of the Rohirrim at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and that is the charge of the winged hussars
Yeah, which is
at
arguably
Vienna.
super heavy cavalry.
Oh yeah, like probably heavier cavalry than the Rohirrim in Lord of the Rings.
The Rohirrim, most of them just had like a few spears, and they just looked like mid cavalry.
They're kind of they're based off of the Anglo-Saxons, you
Yeah,
know. So they got their helmet, their shield, and their mail, but that's about it.
and then like you'll see the odd guy with like something a bit more, but
Yeah,
no.
they got spears and
Oh well, Siege of Vienna just proves historically, time and time again, that the habit of Germany appearing behind you is historical trend.
yeah, it's
Most recently
yeah,
in Germany's trip to France, 1939.
yeah.
Good time.
Good times, good times. Um, so that's actually I like that you said the hussars, the specifically the Polish-Lithuanian winged hussars,
Mm-hmm.
because my second is hussars in general, and I don't actually mean the heavy cavalry, because as badass as they are, I really like the later 18th and 19th century hussars, like from the Napoleonic period and stuff like that, who are kind of fashion statements.
Mm-hmm.
They're as much fashion statements and kind of a club for the lads as they are a cavalry unit.
Yeah,
And they also have just some of the coolest swords and fashion stuff. Like Jimi Hendrix wears a hussar jacket.
yeah,
Like that's what he wore on stage.
yeah. Because if I remember, one of the last hussars was like I'm pretty sure like one of the last English hussars died in like Victoria's time, if I recall.
I
Like they were
think
around for a long time.
I think yeah. I'm trying to remember. Well, he must have, because there were like hussar units.
Like
Because
proper proper
it
hussars. I'm not talking like because for example, in London, Ontario, where the 31 Battalion is based, they literally have an infantry regiment that are called like the Hussars.
yeah, it's the same thing in Montreal. We have I think a mobile infantry
Yeah,
that's called the hussars.
and they're basically mechanized infantry, but they keep a few horses.
Yeah, and so, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the last, like Winston Churchill was, he was light cavalry. Like when he first starts off in like the 1890s, when he starts his military career, I think he's light cavalry. But if I remember I can't remember if he's a hussar. I know that there's a German general in World War One. It's von Mackelsen or something. He was
Arthur,
a hussar.
yeah,
Yeah,
he was
he was a
he was
Death's
one
Head
of the famous
hussar.
Hussars. He had the Totenkopf, which means
Yeah,
death's head.
the Death's Head. And what's her name? The the German emperor's daughter,
Oh yeah,
for Victoria Louise, I think it was.
yeah, something
I
like
think it's Victoria Louise. She was a Death's Head Hussar. She has the full. It is one of the hottest photos to come out of World War One. Just she was good looking when she was
that.
younger, and it's just
Yeah.
this girl in a hussar's outfit with a death's head.
Also, Magnuson, on a high note, was just like yeah, he wasn't the best guy, but like the guy was a badass. Like he started
Oh
off not
yeah,
like at the bottom, but he was like not at the top. Worked his way at the top. Incredibly competent general. Like he was called the Kingmaker because he legitimately was just doing so well. And then
yeah,
World War One ended.
yeah. He was. He's definitely one of my favorite generals from World War One. I don't know too much about World War One, but he's one of my favorite generals.
I can't remember its name. One of my favorite things from World War One was when the German admiral left the Pacific Fleet. He left like one ship behind to do some raiding.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I can't remember its name, and it's annoying me. But that before that ship was sunk, it caused so much damage just to like Allied shipping that it single-handedly caused the increase in insurance of shipping on a global scale because it sunk like so many ships.
Oh, I mean, it's terrible, but it's great.
It's like I like how there's one guy single-handedly increased ship insurance.
My absolute favorite person from World War One is Baron Ungern von Sternberg, which is the Russian guy who he fights on the Eastern Front, and then he goes on to try to during the Russian Revolution he tries to conquer Mongolia and recreate the Mongol Empire
Yep,
with
sounds about right. Oh yeah,
14
that
yeah
crazy
with
guy. Yeah,
1,400 guys.
what a lad.
He was insane. Like he was clinically insane.
Oh yeah, what an absolute mad lad though.
Oh, he was a mad lad. Oh, he was great. I should do a video on him.
You see
Um,
stuff come out of Russia, and it's just amazing. Like Catherine the Great, how she got her title is that she like assembled all the nobles because she was trying to talk about like enlightened ideas and stuff, and they're like, ah, shit. They were just like, oh, I guess she wants a title. Let's just call her the Great.
yeah.
Like, they didn't because she gave them the book and they just had no clue what it was about. So they're like, ah, give her title.
Yeah. Russian history is it's a fun shit show.
Sometime.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
damn it.
right. So we're gonna go on to your number one pick.
Okay, I've debated about this a while, and I came very close to putting dragoons, but
Okay.
I have to go with some of like my most interesting movie was just Swiss mercenaries, specifically
Oh,
the pike, because
yes.
they were the most scared infantry for the longest time. Because it was I can't remember who. I think it was a French general that said if you had Swiss mercenaries and I think it was Spanish or French or carronades or whatever, like the cavalry, you could not lose a battle
Yeah.
because
Swiss
like the
mercenaries
Swiss,
just mopped medieval battlefields
it
up.
wasn't that. It's the fact that they would keep fighting. Like there would be one of them left, and he's like, "I'm still going to actively try to stab you.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
better kill me before I kill you."
Yeah, they are. I don't know too much about the. Well, what I know about the Swiss mercenaries is that the Landsknecht um, are based off of them. They're basically German versions of the Swiss mercenaries.
Swiss German. There were Swiss versions as well, but it's the fact that they banded together for a long time, fought off nations many times their size.
Yeah.
They realized very early, hey, we don't need all this to be effective. They developed their own system independently, and it's the fact that they were very effective as an infantry fighting force for quite a long time. But it's also the fact that they weren't stubborn in it. Like there's always detractors, but eventually they're like, I'll throw a few muskets in there. Get some of
Yeah.
those boys with those big ass two-handed swords. Let's go with it.
Yeah. They were able to be flexible.
Yes.
They are quite. Hey, they still guard the Pope to this day, right? The
Yes.
Swiss Guard. That's.
Yeah,
I
Swiss
mean,
Guard.
they put up some pretty. They put up some pretty badass defenses.
Well,
One of the.
it's when Germany sieged Rome.
Yeah, they were the
Again,
guys who. I think they held. I can't remember what the castle is in Rome.
Angela.
Is it that? That's across from the
That,
Vatican?
yeah, the big Pope Castle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the big Pope Castle.
depending what point of history you are, because there's also the place in France, but we're not going to talk about that today.
That's yeah. We don't talk about that us
We
Catholics.
don't talk about the time of the three popes.
No, we don't talk about the three popes.
But no, it's the fact that I think it was like there was only 400 of them, but they managed to hold up like an army, inflicting massive casualties for quite a long time.
And you know what the majority of that army was?
But wasn't it like other Landsknecht and
Yeah, it
pikemen?
was Landsknecht. Yeah, they fought off.
Yeah,
Well, what I thought were some of the most badass soldiers. What I think are some of the most badass soldiers of all time.
yeah.
400 guys.
I think it's at the end. There was only like 36 or something that survived,
Yeah,
something like that.
I think it's 36.
That's one of the
They're
most
badass.
reputations. If anyone listens to Sabaton, right, like the Last Stand, which everyone thinks is about the Crusade, is actually about that.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's about when the Swiss Guard basically held off, the army long enough for the Pope to escape.
Yeah. Huh. I'm gonna have a listen to that afterward.
Yep, it's nothing to do with the Crusades.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Cool. That's good. Um,
So if I recall, you have
Yeah.
two more units to go through.
I have a singular unit because we both agreed on the Roman Legionnaire.
Okay.
So my last unit, and I think I'd actually put this at the top of my list, is the classical Greek hoplite.
Mm.
They're just, I don't know.
They just
not-
look cool.
They're just so cool. I'm speechless. They're basically taking a tried and true method of that phalanx formation, and they're like, you know what? This is great, but we're going to make it even better, and we're going to be badasses at the same time while doing it.
I still think they had some of the coolest helmets right up until the Germans started making their cool ass knight armor.
Yes, yeah. I think, yeah, probably those are probably the two coolest helmets of all time. That Corinthian helmet.
Yeah.
That the helmets in 300 are based off of.
Yeah.
And yeah, late medieval knightly helmets. Those are pretty cool too.
Hold on. The only reason I didn't mention any knights is because a knight was more of like a role rather than a dedicated unit. It's in regards to this list.
Yeah, I was thinking about putting the late medieval knight on it, but ultimately the hussars kind of bumped them down because hussars look flashier.
Yeah. I just really like dragoons because they functioned as light cavalry, but then, they gave them pistols and rifles just to ride around and shoot at people with.
Yeah.
They were just having a fun time.
I mean, I think early dragoons, like the initial mounted cavalry dragoons, are pretty bad. I don't think the initial the initial reason that dragoons came into I don't know, I'm not wording right now. But like the initial dragoon as a guy who, as an infantryman who could just get on a horse and they'd go around somewhere else and then get off and act as infantrymen. I think that it seems like a good idea, but it didn't work out as well as it could have. Mm-hmm. But as time progresses, dragoons become just really cool guys.
I just find the whole concept cool because it wasn't always it didn't always work well in practice. Because if I recall, the charge of the Light Brigade was a bunch of dragoons getting massacred.
Yeah, but at that point, dragoons were dedicated light cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also, I think, the charge of the Light Brigade was and you can correct me because I think I'm wrong, but I think it was a miscommunication.
Yeah, they were. If I recall, they were mistakenly ordered into the valley, and just got absolutely destroyed.
Yeah. Okay, so I wasn't wrong. That's good.
There's one more unit I want to add because I thought you would have added them, but the fact that they have not yet been mentioned is absolutely criminal. But the Gurkhas.
Oh, Gurkhas. Yeah, that's true.
As far as I'm aware, I believe they have more Victoria Crosses than any other group within the English army.
Yeah, I think they do.
Some of the best and most fierce fighting soldiers to ever live. If you ever read some of their stories, it's absolutely terrifying. They have their signature courage, and they're still very, very active today. Even in the Falklands, running around and doing some crazy stuff. I recall.
Yeah. Yeah, the Gurkhas, I don't know, this is just for me, but the Gurkhas don't have the same kind of mythos as I know they do in other and like
Mhm.
Britain and in South Africa and whatnot. But the fact that we still hear about them shows that
I just
they're
think,
pretty cool.
like, just because of the stuff they've done, some of those things that they've done, some absolutely amazing stories and things you can read about. And there are many groups of warrior courses that have done astonishing things, but I think they are honestly some of the best soldiers to ever have lived. And then even now, like you read some of the stories of stuff they did in First, Second World War, other wars.
Yeah.
There's stories where like people have they've heard that they're going to be fighting the Gurkhas and like I'm out. Like people have surrendered.
Oh,
They have that scary of a reputation.
one of my favorite kind of anecdotes about Gurkhas comes from a documentary about the Yeti. All right. And it's
Okay.
from it's basically a Gurkha claims to have seen a Yeti, and that alone is part of the propagation of the myth because Gurkhas are seen as just these such badass and like very truthful guys
Mm-hmm.
that a Gurkha saying, "Oh yeah, I saw a Yeti," you're kind of like, "Oh yeah, maybe Yetis do exist." If a Gurkha says, "I saw a Yeti and I was afraid," you're like, maybe Yetis exist."
Yeah, because it's like if you look at some of their training, like I was watching video, but one of the things they legitimately just have a basket full of rocks and like a strap on the head to carry it, and
Yeah.
they go up, like they just climb a mountain and they're doing it, and like the trainer's like, yeah, about 60 years ago, all of them would have been able to do this. Now we can have to somewhat explain it, but yeah, we still do it.
I like that they're like, yeah, we got to explain it, but they still do it.
It's like there's some of them like because there's generally some people in the group that know everything about it, they're fine, but of course, as time goes on, it's getting more and more modern, and life changes, and people are
Yeah.
coming all over places to try and join the Gurkhas of varying nations.
Yeah. Well, it's like when my brother says, "Oh, I want to join the Marines." It's like, okay, yeah, you want to join the U.S. Marines. Like, all right, we'll see how that goes.
Why don't Troy want to? Wouldn't he have to be? Hmm. Can
Well,
you
I
join
think
U.S. Marines as a not a citizen?
no, you cannot. Um,
You can go join the Royal Marines. They're better anyway.
you can join. Yeah, you can join the Royal Marines. But no, he just watches too many action movies, and in action movies, it's always a Marine that's like that's the guy.
I do find it funny, and the Americans don't like to talk about. I think, and I might be wrong on this, but I believe it's the Royal Marines have the hardest and one of the most intense training regimes of a regular regiment. So like not special forces, not like Delta Squad, but like of just a standard regiment. It's like 8 months training of just absolute, and that's if you do it in one standing. Because like
Yeah,
I was watching some of the stuff they do, and it's just like, yeah, no, thank you. Like it's just crazy, and that's just for Marines.
yeah.
Like, oh, you're gonna go join, the SAS. This is like, yeah, you're Marine.
I have a book I have a survival guide by the SAS, an SAS guide. No, a survival guide by an SAS guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a good little book, good little flip through. Anyway, I hope that was interesting. I'm gonna stop recording now. But yeah, Hugo, thank you for joining me. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed that conversation more than the other one.
Everyone's just more tedious and laborious. So I think in the future,
Yeah,
going
we
to,
got to nerd out a little bit.
yeah, I think something we're going to lead forward is I think we have to try and something with more diametrically opposed on.
Yeah. Uh, See, the thing is, we're both so smart that there's not a lot of things that we're too opposed on.
You
But
can
I'm sure we can figure something out.
always find something like there's normally just points of history and things. This like I had a solid debate with a friend the other day because he believed Alexander was more lucky than smart.
Oh yeah, we were going to talk about that.
Yeah,
We can do
that,
a quick one on that
that's
afterward.
an that's an entire rabbit hole, and I would have to go relook through some stuff.
Yeah, yeah, we
But
can do that. Yeah,
but no, I'm sure
we'll
we
try
can.
to squeeze that one in.
But yeah, if anyone has any interesting suggestions, you're welcome to write them down.
Absolutely, I would. I'm open to things, even things that I do not know a lot about, um, which is a lot of things. So, you know, don't assume.
Uh, just don't pull up some like really, really weird stuff that has no basis.
No, I think the weirder the better.
Like, when I say weird, it's like some mythical battle that it's like, well, we can read about it in this exact one book.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I have a. All right, anyway, we'll talk about that after. We're at 55 minutes, so I think we're going to keep this one relatively short. We're not going over an hour. Hugo, thank you for coming on. Going to have you on again sometime, maybe next week. Not sure. We'll figure that out. But yeah, thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
See you later. Oh, and there we